Ashley Mailloux here with the Daily Racing Form. Saturday at Santa Anita Park, there's a pair of graded stakes, and we're going to look at the feature, the Grade 2 San Pasqual at 1.125 miles on the main track. This is for 4-year-olds and upward, and we'll take a look at the field. I think there's a couple horses maybe to look at in terms of the top spot. Obviously, the number 1, Hopper, and the 6, Newgrange stand out in this field, and I think Hopper, with the inside draw and the speed that he's shown in several of his starts, he could be part of that control line pace scenario here, and maybe he takes it gate to wire, but we'll see. We'll see if a couple other horses maybe press him. I mentioned Newgrange is one to maybe note. Tripoli is a hard-knocking horse who kind of shows up in most of his starts, as well as a few others. So we'll start with Hopper, 5-2 on the morning line. Going to get blinkers off and kind of rejoins the barn, of Bob Baffert. And looking at the last 2 races, has obviously been impressive. Has won both of them by open lengths, most recently 5 1/4 in the Grade 3 Affirmed. To be honest, it was a short field for him. Not too sure what he's faced in those races, but he has improved with every start. His Beyer speed figures have gone from a 65 to an 87 to more recently a 95. And the removal of blinkers I thought was interesting here. We haven't seen him since June, though, so we'll see what he does here. It's a good angle for the barn and working tremendous for this return off the long layoff. The number 2, Tripoli, 6-year-old son of Kitten's Joy, who I mentioned, hard-knocking horse. Last year, his record is less than ideal. He just had that one on-the-board finish that was 2 starts back while facing a bit lesser than he's going to face today. And we'll actually take a look at that replay because I think it's a key race to look at. That's Santa Anita on November 6th. We should take a look at the break here. 2 horses involved. The number 2 is Tripoli. The number 3 is Newgrange, who will face again. And you see Newgrange just guns to the lead. It's kind of an easy move for this horse. And when you look at the stretch, not too much change. Tripoli is actually towards the back of the pack, does try to kind of reel in Newgrange here. But I think when you look at how easy Newgrange made the lead, Tripoli certainly had his work cut out for him. And in the end, was simply second best. Most recently, he would race at Zia Park. He finished 4th in that field of 6, and he was heavily favored. And maybe that's a bit of a concern. He has been favored in those last 2. We'll see if the rider change to Kazushi Kimura makes a difference. I just think kind of looking at the races he's been in, this is certainly a softer spot for him. The 3, Parnelli, out of the John Sheriff's barn, was 6th last time out in the Grade 3 Native Diver, and it was his first start off a long layoff. He wasn't technically a long shot in there, but he didn't take much respect, and I thought he was just kind of flat throughout. He didn't show much. You go down the page, he was a 2-time winner back in 2022, but both of those were against a non-stakes competition. He did face some nice horses as well, but I think these are deeper waters for him, and I think he's going to be a long shot in this field. The number 4, Perfect Flight, out of the Peter Miller barn, stepped up to Grade 1 competition last time out in the Malibu, and he's certainly not facing that caliber today. You look at the names, Taiba was very impressive, winning the Malibu, Forbidden Kingdom, Hoist the Gold. They're just really tough competition, and prior to that, he really hadn't done much wrong in his career. He was a 3-time winner last year. He's kind of always been very close to the pace in his races. If not on the lead, he's been tracking in second and kind of applying pressure to his rivals. And I even thought 3 starts back on the turf, he ran well. So surface doesn't seem to be an issue for him. I just think last time out, it was the level of competition. That was going 7/8. So he's going to stretch out to 1 1/8. And you go down the page, he has fared well at 1.16 miles in the past. And his 2 efforts at today's distance, he's got a 2nd place to show for it. In his other race, he can draw a line through it. It was very early in his career. The number 5, American Admiral, out of the Tim Yachteen barn. I thought disappointed last time out. I really liked him in that race going into it, I should say, on October 8th. And Breakfast Ride finished directly in front of him. He just had no kind of power in the stretch. He wasn't able to close in at all. Typically, we do see a really nice late closing kick for him, and he wasn't able to offer that in that race. So not sure what happened, but you do see a bit of a layoff. You haven't seen him since that October 8th race, and it's a good angle for the barn off this sort of layoff. They're 17% from a sample size of 24. Ramon Vasquez gets the call, who's just 1 for 4 at Santa Anita with these connections. The number 6, Newgrange. This is a horse who I think demands respect, a 4-time winner. We showed that replay of his race 2 starts back where he broke on top. He did it very easily and just kind of took command in that race. And more recently, they put him back into stakes competition in the Grade 3 Native Diver. And Defunded was much the best, who was a horse that I didn't think had the best of starts, but rushed to the front, was able to control things on the front end. Azul Coast finished 2nd. At least with Newgrange, when you look at the race, there were some tired horses kind of entering the stretch and the stretch run. And he did try to make up ground, but the top 2 in there were simply much the best. We'll see what he does in here. In terms of a pace scenario, I think he's going to kind of find himself just off the pace. I think when we looked at that replay 2 starts back, he was on the lead because no one really wanted it, and he broke sharply, and that's where the connection sent him. Phil D'Amato, not the best of meets so far at Santa Anita, but this is a horse that he's very familiar with. The number 7, Go On. This one trained by Doug O'Neill. He's coming out of a lot of turf races. Actually, his last 4 efforts have been on the grass. When you look at his efforts, he hasn't shown up in those last 2, but they were grade 2 competition. They were at 1.5 miles, and more recently 1.125 miles. I'm curious to see him back on the main track. It's been a while. His most recent race on Santa Anita, on the main track, I should say, was back in December of 2021 when he finished 4th in the grade 2 San Antonio behind Express Train and other horses such as Hot Rod Charlie, who needs no introduction, in 8 Ring. So I think it's interesting to see the connections, getting him back on the dirt. He's winless on the surface, but he is working well. So maybe they decided they needed to change things up on him, and that's why we're going to see that surface change for him today. Now, looking at the horses in the field, I think the number 8, Breakfast Ride, maybe the most intriguing. He stepped up last time out to stakes competition for the first time. He didn't fare too well, but you look at the names that he faced in the grade 2 San Antonio, and he's certainly not facing them today. The race that I really wanted to key in on, and why I'm curious about him, is the race actually 2 starts back. We'll show that replay. The race was at Del Mar, and looking at the trip that he got, it was a field of 9. He kind of sat off the pace, and he gets into some trouble here in the stretch where he really doesn't have any room to go. And luckily, his rider was patient and waited for that seam to open. He was able to split those horses and kept rolling. And I think at this point, it looks like the outside horse maybe is moving the best of all. But once Breakfast Ride hits his best stride, he's really extending and opening up on the field. I just think this is an interesting spot for him today. Luis Contreras has the call for the John Sadler trainee. And rounding out the field, the number 9, Messier. At this point, I simply don't know what to do with this runner, if I'm being blunt. He's not shown up in his last 3 efforts. Going into the Kentucky Derby, he looked great. He was second behind Taiba in the Santa Anita Derby, but after having a poor performance in the Kentucky Derby, he's yet to hit the board since then. He was forwardly placed 2 starts back, going 6.5 at Keeneland. Then more recently in the Malibu, he only beat 1 runner. The one thing I will say, he has flashed some early speed in the end. I just found him to be too mysterious to use in the spot, especially when other horses more recently have been racing much better and they've at least been consistent. So looking at the group overall, I ultimately landed on the number 1 Hopper, as I felt like he might be able to control things here from the gate. He's been able to do it in the past. I do understand he's facing tougher and a bigger field than he faced last time out, but I just think the draw sets up beautifully for him in this race. Then you go to the number 6, Newgrange, who I think is going to get that nice trip off the pace. I mentioned the 8, Breakfast Ride. He's a bit of a wild card. If I was playing the exotics in this race, I'd certainly use him underneath. I think he's going to improve and show more than he did last time out. And then rounding out my top 4, the number 2, Tripoli. Hopefully he'll get back on track as a 6-year-old. He has been in some deep waters throughout his career, and his connections keep him here in a stake once again, which is always a positive sign. But for me, the number 1 Hopper is where I'll land on Saturday's grade 2 San Pasqual.